Hey guys, welcome to my workshop, or I guess I should say welcome to what will be my workshop. Now, I've sort of just been in this crazy cleaning and organizing mode in here over the last couple of weeks. I think I'm a little bit late on the whole spring cleaning thing since it's now July, but during all of that cleaning and organizing, I've kind of decided that I think I want a space in this workshop that has an area, workstations that are a little bit more permanent. Now, the way I've sort of worked in this space over the last couple of years is I've kind of just worked along the outskirts of these two garage bays. And the reason that I have done that is because my husband is a big car guy. He likes to have project cars that he can park in here, and sometimes he likes to park in here in the winter. I don't blame him. But we have talked about it and decided because I'm working in here basically every single day now, it makes sense to use one of these garage bays so that I can have a work area that's a little bit more permanent. So I'm sort of taking over and claiming ownership of this garage bay right here. So let me show you some of the upgrades that I've already made to this space. So first of all, I added this French cleat wall system to this wall here. And I have to say that I absolutely love using this wall. It's such a simple storage solution for storing some of these items that I grab quite frequently. So I try to keep everything on this wall that is something I'm pretty much using on a daily basis. I did put out a video about how I added this wall, I think a couple months ago or maybe a year ago, I don't know, time flies. But if you wanted to see how I did that, I'll leave that video linked below. Now, I didn't put out a video about this, but I also added a section of cabinets here below where I just have tons of drawers for storage. And just, again, I keep mostly things that I'm using on a pretty consistent basis, but I do have some drawers full of things just like cabinet hardware, drawer slides, drawer hardware, just all different kinds of stuff, honestly. Another big improvement that I made to this space is something that I'm not sure is gonna show up on camera, but trust me when I say it has made a huge improvement. And that's adding 6 of these LED light strips to the ceiling above this bay here. Now, let me just see if I can show you the difference. Like I said, I don't know if it's gonna show up on camera, and yes, I have to use my little pointer stick because I don't have a remote for these lights and the switch is on the ceiling, but this is the amount of light with the lights on. Check out how it is without them. So, a lot darker in this space, especially like back here in this corner. Not much light. Before, all we had was this one light here. So adding these LED lights to this space is just gonna help me be able to see much better. And so for like this back wall here, I'm still sort of figuring out what I wanna do with it. For now, I've got a shelf with a lot of my tools on it. I've got a rack where I can store some clamps. My plan is to buy some nicer, longer clamps, so I'm leaving myself room that I can add that. Over here, I've got a lot of my tools that are on wheels, and I just keep those stored up against the wall and out of the way. And one of the other things that I want to add to this space is a huge outfeed / assembly table that's gonna sit in the middle here. That way I can, like I said, have more outfeed support for my table saw when I need it, and then also have another larger assembly table that I can access in this workshop. And this is probably not gonna come as a shock to most of you since miter saw station is probably somewhere in the title of this video, but I'm also gonna build a miter saw station. And hey, I know what you're thinking. Why would I make a miter saw station when I have this very nice Delta miter saw stand that's on wheels? And to that, my answer would be, it's because I'm old. And this is very heavy. That's it, that's my reason. I carry this thing in and out of the house all day long. I'm constantly moving it around, and this back's not getting any younger. And at the end of the day, after I've moved this thing around so much, my back is just done. So I kind of want to have this be somewhere more permanent so that I don't have to move it around all the time. It's very nice to have this stand so that when I need to move it, I can, but I think for the purposes of how I use the miter saw, I would just like for it to have a more permanent home. So that's what this whole video is gonna be about. I'm going to make a new home for this miter saw to live. Now let's talk about this particular miter saw really quick. All right, so this miter saw is I'm gonna read it because I'll never remember this or get this right otherwise. This is the DWS 779 double bevel sliding compound miter saw. That is a tongue twister. And I do honestly love this saw. I love that it does slide. You can do mitered cuts, you can beveled cuts. This is a really nice miter saw. Now, the one drawback of this miter saw that kind of seems to be one of the main reasons that people upgrade to a different miter saw is look how much space it takes up. Because of this sliding feature, you're not gonna be able to put it up against a wall. So a lot of people will upgrade to something like the Festool or Bosch or something. I've seen some Ridgid ones that have some arms where basically it still has the sliding function, but you can put it a little bit closer to the wall. That way, if you wanna have your miter saw station up against the wall, which a lot of people do, and I would love to do that, but here's the thing about me. I'm not gonna go out and buy a brand new miter saw just to put it up against the wall. Fortunately, I have the space where I can make this one work. And like I said, I like this miter saw. So I'm gonna keep this saw and we're gonna make a miter saw station that will work for this particular saw. So I've got some very loose plans for this miter saw station right now. I basically just wanna make a couple of cabinets where I can have maybe some shelves for storage, maybe a couple of pull-out trays. I do wanna incorporate some sort of offcut or a place I can take some of the scrap wood and put. Then I do want to integrate a new tool that I got into the top, which you'll see a little bit later on in the video. Obviously, because I have this inside now, I need to create some sort of hood or figure out dust collection, get this thing hooked up to a vacuum, get it on some sort of auto switch. All those things are gonna take place in this video. So let's get started. Let's build a miter saw station. All right, so first thing we have to do when it comes to this miter saw station is we gotta get rid of the miter saw. Let's get this thing out of here so we got room to work. Laying some tape down so I can figure out the footprint of this miter saw station. I'm thinking maybe like 112 inches long. In this middle section here, it's gonna be about 42 inches this way. Like I said, to accommodate that larger footprint for the miter saw that I have. The rest of the cabinets will be a little bit less in depth. The nice thing about having these really deep cabinets is I think I can put storage on both sides. That way I'll be able to access things on both sides. Given the limited space though, instead of doing drawers, I might do something like sliding doors, but we'll see. All right, let's get the plywood cut down to size so that we can start the next step, which is getting these things assembled. I think. We'll see. I don't know.
Well, I really sold that, didn't I? How obvious is it that I'm figuring this up as I go? Anyways, to start this build off, I just ripped a couple of sheets of 3/4 inch plywood down to make up all of my cabinet pieces. And then here I'm just cutting the toe kicks into some of those pieces so I can start prepping all of them for assembly.
All right guys, we have all of the pieces cut for our miter saw station now. I've got all of my 3 sheets of plywood cut down into all the different parts for each cabinet. Now, when I make a sort of set of cabinets like this or a longer bank of cabinets, I try to just do them in separate cabinets and join them together rather than trying to do one huge piece. So I've got everything sort of stacked together per cabinet. And my next step is I need to drill some pocket holes in all of my support pieces so that I can join all these panels together. And how I'm gonna do that this time is with my new tool, which this is the Craig Foreman, and this is a pocket hole cutting machine for those that don't know. Now, this is something that I sort of went back and forth on for a while, just trying to decide if this was something that I really needed. And to be honest, I don't really need it. I do have a smaller pocket hole jig. But the thing is I make a lot of cabinets, and so I do think this thing is going to save me a lot of time. It's just gonna speed up that process. With the amount of pocket holes that I generally use, then I think this thing is going to be very nice to have in the workshop. And this is actually something that I plan on integrating in the miter saw station itself. So let's get some of these pocket holes cut and try out this new machine.
So once my brain finally figured out that I didn't have to manually adjust the clamp for this thing every single time, then cutting these pocket holes started to go really quickly. And this actually ended up being the perfect project to have a tool like this for, because I had so many of these pocket holes to drill for all of these cabinets, and this thing really saved me a lot of time.
Working on the cabinet right now that's gonna house the miter saw, and I'm just marking out where I want the actual shelf for the miter saw to sit. I want the miter saw to be flush with the top of the miter saw station, so I'm just marking down so that I know where to place my support pieces so that I can place my shelf on top of it, which my miter saw can sit on top of that. So I've got everything marked, and I think I'm gonna try to get this assembled now. This is a massive cabinet, and I'm here by myself, so we'll see how this goes.
Now to assemble these cabinets, all I'm doing is applying some wood glue to those support pieces I drilled pocket holes into, and then getting them attached to my side pieces using 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. You'll see me construct a lot of cabinets this way, and these are no different. Once I sort of had my cabinet box somewhat together, I placed it in its new home and then worked on making sure it was sitting level. Now I knew that I would have to shim this thing level, probably because these floors in our garage are not even close to level. In fact, they slope on both sides for drainage in each bay, so I just placed some shims in any areas that, you know, needed a little boost.
Alright guys, so my very first cabinet is put together now, and the reason I started with this cabinet is because it's sort of in the middle, and this is just a very basic cabinet. This is the cabinet though that the miter saw is going to sit on here. I have a shelf that'll go here, and then the inside is just going to house my vacuum, and eventually I'm going to get some extra dust collection sort of stuff, and that can all live under here. So next I just got to put together the rest of the cabinets. I've got 2 separate cabinets that are going to be on this side, and then 1 larger cabinet that's going to be on that side. right guys, so I sort of have my miter saw station mocked up for the moment. I'm getting my miter saw in here and just sort of figuring out where I want it to sit exactly. And this is where I sort of realized that I might have screwed up my design a little bit. I kind of had a feeling I was going to run into this issue, and I probably should have took the time to figure it out before, but we're figuring it out right now. And the problem I'm having is basically here, as you can see, if I want to extend my miter saw all the way, it's going to block it a little bit. So what I'm gonna have to do essentially is just cut a little section of this corner off. That way I can fully extend this for making mitered cuts. All right guys, I think we fixed this problem. I'll be able to slide this to each side now for when I want to make angled cuts. So I'll just have to make sure when I put my top on here that I'll have to notch out a section on each side as well. One problem solved. I'm sure there'll be more. Let's keep going.
Okay, now true confession here, this cabinet in particular was a huge pain in the butt. I should have built this differently and added another side piece to this cabinet, but I had to be all thrifty and try to spend the least amount of money on plywood possible, which to be fair was still a lot of money, but I digress. I was able to get it together eventually, but I ended up having to make a couple of modifications to it, as future Sarah is about to tell you.
All right guys, so I got this other side of the miter saw station put together now. And I've kind of run into what do you put in the bottom? Hold on a sec. I've kind of run into a bit of an issue here. I'm not sure what I was thinking when I planned this thing out. I mean, I did plan this thing in like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, so I probably should have put a little bit more time into it, because this span right here is just a little bit too wide for it to be really well supported. So what I've decided to do is I went ahead and just put two 2x4s together, and I'm gonna slide that under here. And then these bottom supports, I'm gonna screw down into that 2x4. Just that way, that helps with that span. And then I'll run a shelf in between these supports on the top and the bottom that'll sit again on that 2x4, and that should make these a little bit more sturdy. That way they don't have any sag to them. And I'm going to be integrating that Craig pocket hole cutting machine into this section here, which is kind of why I needed this wider span to accommodate that. So we're figuring this out on the fly. It might not look the prettiest, but I think it's gonna end up working out okay. So I'm just gonna get this thing beefed up a little bit, and you know, I think it'll be good to go.
Next, I worked on building a little box for my Craig Foreman machine. I just made sure that my side pieces for my box sat flush with the rest of my cabinet. It's totally normal to have dance party breaks with your dog while working, right? Now, it's something truly special when a tool can actually help make a home for itself. That's essentially what this Craig Foreman is doing now by cutting these pocket holes for assembling this box. Talk about self-sufficient. Once I had the box for the Craig Foreman attached, I just worked on attaching the rest of my top support pieces, making sure they were level with everything else as I went. Now that all of my cabinet boxes were assembled, I spruced them up a bit by adding some paint to all of the exterior surfaces.
All right guys, so I've got a couple coats of paint on this miter saw station now. I'm not gonna paint the entire thing, like the inside and everything, because I'm not gonna waste my time or the paint doing that, since this is just shop furniture, and honestly, I'm probably the only person that will ever see it. The other thing I decided against doing is normally when I build cabinets, I will install some sort of edge banding on the face frame or some sort of face frame just to kind of hide those exposed plywood edges. But I decided against that for these because, again, it's just shop furniture, and honestly, I just wanted to save a little bit of material and money. I did spring for something a little bit nicer for the top. So in order to save some money, I decided against adding any sort of face frame, because that would require a lot of material to cover up all of these exposed edges. And honestly, the plywood edges for this plywood, they look pretty nice, so I'm good to leave it like it is. So the next step for this base is, obviously I have a lot of openings that I need to fill. I have a lot of drawers that I have to build, so let's go and start cutting down the parts for those drawers.
Well, I hope you guys are ready to watch me struggle for a bit. There's nothing quite as challenging for me than lifting 1/2-inch plywood up on some sawhorses by myself, well, except maybe lifting 3/4-inch plywood, but that's something that my back has been too scared to try yet. Sure, I could have cut this stuff down on the ground, but now see, that is something that my knees are scared of. There seems to be a theme here.
Alright guys, so I got all of the parts cut for my drawers now. I totaled it up, and it turns out that I have 15 drawers that are going to be a part of this miter saw station. Why did I do that to myself? I don't know. That's a lot of drawers to have to cut up parts for, but they're all cut up now, and now it's time to start getting them assembled. Now, I didn't film all of the steps of cutting up all the parts for these drawers because, I don't know, that just felt really boring. I didn't know if you guys wanted to see me just rip down tons of different parts for all these drawers, but let me know if that's something you want to see. I'll do it. But basically, I just cut all of the parts for all 15 of those drawers out of some 1/2-inch plywood, and now, like I said, it's time to get them assembled so that I can get them installed into my miter saw station. Now, these are the drawer slides that I'm gonna be using for majority, I guess I should say for 14 of the 15 drawers, and that's just these very simple bottom mount drawer slides. I think these things are like $5 or $6 a piece. And then one drawer that's gonna be a little bit bigger, I'm gonna use this undermount drawer slide here. Now, I'm probably in the minority when it comes to the types of drawer slides that I like to use. A lot of people like to use the whole ball bearing side mount drawer slides. I've installed a ton of those in the past, and for whatever reason, I am just not a fan of those. I would much rather use the undermount drawer slides, but those are, you know, a good bit more expensive. So when I'm trying to save money on a project, which I'm trying to save money on this because I've already spent a lot of money in plywood and other supplies, then I'm just gonna use these very simple drawer slides. So let's begin the process of throwing all these drawers together. Remember, 15. Let's go.
Now, if you've watched any of my videos before, first of all, thank you. You're really cool. And second of all, then you know that I typically make most of my drawer boxes out of 1/2-inch plywood, and I join my box together using wood glue and a couple of well-placed brad nails. It's a very quick and dirty, dirty? Did I just say dirty? Quick and easy way to throw together some drawer boxes.
All right guys, so I've got my box put put together now. And so the last step for this is I've got to add a bottom panel to it. And the way I sort of started constructing my drawer boxes after doing them so many times and seeing other people doing this way is I started making this back section here just a little bit shorter than the rest of the boards for the box. It sits just below where that groove starts, and the reason for that is that way when you want to add your bottom panel, it's much simpler to just slide this in through that groove. Put that in there, and I will take a little hammer and hammer it the rest of the way, get it good and seated. All right, that's in there good. And so now, as you can see, it's sort of just resting on that back piece. And now what I can do is flip this thing over, and I'm gonna countersink a couple of holes on here and then attach screws. Now you notice that I didn't put any glue in this groove, and the reason for that is that if for whatever reason this bottom panel was to ever fail on me and needed to be replaced, all I would have to do is remove those few screws on the back, take this thing out, and then I can pop a new one in.
Once my boxes were all assembled, I started installing the drawer slides to the drawer boxes. Now these particular drawer slides could not be any easier to install, so this step went pretty quickly. Then I had to install the opposing part of the drawer slide to my cabinet box using the very well thought out calculations that I did in my head, which turned out to be very, very wrong. And the drawer, it just simply would not fit, which I gotta tell you is one of the most annoying things. But I was able to fix it by basically starting all over. Eventually, I got all of the drawer boxes installed into the cabinet. Eventually. Then I took some time to add a little iron-on edge banding to all of my drawer fronts before giving them a couple coats of paint.
All right guys, so I know it might not seem like it because of, movie magic, but I've actually been working on these drawers for the last several days. If you don't know, working on drawers just takes a lot of time. At least it does for me. There's just a lot of parts, and like I said, there was 15 of these drawers. Then you gotta get the drawer fronts made and get those cut to size and get them painted, and so it just took a little bit of time. But I'm finally to the last step for these drawers, and that's getting these drawer fronts attached on the front here. Now, I've wised up over the years and learned to go ahead and drill out my holes for my handles. That way I can very easily just screw some screws through those to kind of hold it in place. And then I can sink in some screws from the inside of the drawer. And then once it's attached, I can then go in and add my handle. So let's just get started on adding these drawer fronts to all of these drawers, and then we'll be done and we can move on to another step. All right, well, that didn't go as smoothly as I hoped it would. What happened here was that I didn't add any sort of face frame to this cabinet here because I wanted to maximize the size of these drawers. But that meant that it was a little bit tougher getting drawer fronts that were going to be the exact right size and get all the gaps the same. And to be honest, I don't think they're all the same, but I can live with it. This is just shop furniture. I think it looks close enough that your eye's not really gonna catch it all the time. And I did have to trim one of these down because I must have screwed up the calculations at some point, but that's okay. We got that figured out. We got them all on. I think they look okay. So now the next step is to go ahead and remove these screws and then go ahead and get all of those drawer handles installed. so I'm not sure if my camera recorded any of that. I thought it was recording. It might not have been. I'll have to go back and check the footage. But anyways, I got all of the drawer handles for this section of drawers installed. I'm gonna hold off on installing this one for right now because where this is a taller drawer that's gonna house some trash cans and stuff, I'm gonna have to add some supports into the door. That way I can install some brackets to make that one operational. So I'm gonna move on to the other side and basically do this same thing all over again. All right, so my initial plan for this drawer was to have it right next to the miter saw. That way I could just pull this thing out as I'm cutting and I could dump all the smaller offcuts into here. That way if I want to dig through it later, if I need a small piece, or I can just simply take the trash can out and take it to the fire and burn it. I might use both of those for that, but I might also use one of these as a just trash can for trash that I have in this work area. But what I need to do for this drawer in particular to get this drawer front attached, so as you can see, my drawer box is only about 6 inches high, and then obviously my drawer front is going to be much higher than that. So, and where the handle's gonna be, I'd be pulling up here where there's no real support. So what my plan is I'm going to take these brackets here and place them on each side, and then I can connect these brackets into the drawer front itself. That'll give me a little bit more support for this, but now what I wanna do is I wanna build out this drawer box so that I have somewhere to anchor these brackets into here on the side. So I'm just gonna beef up the side here. I might also throw in a divider section here too, just to keep these from moving around any. All right, so I've got these bracket pieces attached to the drawer now. And since I don't have the luxury of like the other drawers that I did where I could just screw some screws in there to attach it temporarily, I'm gonna have to do this drawer a little bit different. So I'm not sure if this is the best idea or not, but this is what I came up with in the moment. I am just going to apply some double-sided tape to this end of the bracket. That way when the drawer is back in place, I can take that drawer front and just set it up where I need it, and then hopefully that double-sided tape will just stick well enough till I can get it attached from this side of the drawer box.
At this point, Murphy and his friend Baxter showed up to offer me a little encouragement to keep up the good work, and y'all, I was eating it up. Now, anyone that knows me well knows that this is peak Sarah happiness levels right here. Lastly, I just closed off that space behind the trash can drawers with some 1/4-inch plywood and added a couple of shelves for storage.
All right, so you guys caught me. I know I said I wasn't gonna use any of these side mount ball bearing style drawer slides, but I changed my mind. I'm allowed to change my mind. What I decided, I wasn't 100% sure what I was even gonna do with this section here. I thought I just might make it some shelves where I could just store some items, but I decided what I would rather do is use it to pull out, have some pull out, slide out drawers where I can house some of these things like this Festool sustainer for my sander. I've got a lot of these like plastic sort of sustainer like things that for like my paint sprayer, and I've just got a couple of those. So I'm gonna make about 4 drawers for this section here. And the reason I'm going with these types of drawer slides rather than those really cheap drawer slides is because these allow the drawer to full out for the full extension of the drawer slide. So that's just going to allow me to pull it all the way out. That way I can easily take out the sustainers if I need to. The other style drawer slides, they don't pull out, they don't extend out all of the way. Not a huge deal for the other drawers that I use those for because I don't really need them to extend out all the way, but for these I do. So I'm gonna get these installed now and will be pretty close. I think these are the last 4 drawers that I have to install for this space, and then we can move on to something else, maybe the top.
All right. I know I talked bad about these side mount drawer slides earlier in the video, but I think I figured out the problem. The problem is that I've just been buying really crappy, cheap versions of them. And believe it or not, I decided to not do that this time. The drawer slides that I'm using here are from a company called Ravenite. I got them off Amazon. They were not the cheapest option available, but I have used their products before and I feel like they're a little higher quality. Now, installation of these drawer slides actually went so smoothly that I almost felt bad for talking trash about their type. So if you need full extension, soft close features in a drawer slide and you don't want to spend the big bucks on undermount drawer slides, then I think these are a pretty good alternative if I do say so myself. And I do. I also went ahead and cut up a couple strips of 1/4-inch plywood to attach to my toe kick areas for each cabinet to close those off. Basically, its main purpose for me is to stop Murphy's ball from rolling under there.
All right, guys, I'm super excited because I'm actually almost done working on this cabinet base for this miter saw station. I've been working on this for a couple of days and I'm kind of ready to move on to the next step, so we got to get this wrapped up first. All I have left is covering up these openings here on both sides. Now, this section here is what's gonna house my vacuum that I'm gonna hook up to the miter saw. So it's pretty bare bones in there, but I do wanna go ahead and cover up these openings. Now, since it's a pretty large opening and I don't really want it to swing all the way open, I am trying to leave this section here free for working on cars and such. What I came up with is I decided that I'll take some of this magnetic tape and I'll place it all along my perimeter. And then I also will place it on this little door that I made up along the perimeter of that as well. I just threw my logo on here with my Cricut out of some vinyl. And then I'll just use that magnetic tape to get this attached on there. That way, if I need to take this off to take the vacuum out and empty the vacuum or whatnot, I can very easily do so.
Now, this magnetic tape does come with an adhesive back on it, but I wanted to make sure that this stuff was good and secure, so I just applied some CA glue to it as well to keep it from peeling off in the future.
All right, guys, it's finally time to get a top on this thing. This whole miter saw station would not be very good without one. So the first step I'm gonna do is just take some measurements for each of the sections for my top. Now there's gonna be 3 separate sections, one here, one small one here, and another small one there. So I'm just gonna go ahead, take those measurements, and then get my plywood pieces cut down to size.
So these plywood pieces were a little too large to safely run through the table saw on my own, so I decided to cut them with my circular saw instead. To help get a bit of a cleaner cut, I just laid down some painter's tape before cutting, and this leaves me with a much smoother edge, free from a lot of that typical tear out.
All right, so I've got the pieces sort of laid out here for my top, but remember, because I had to notch out this section here to accommodate my miter saw being able to make angled cuts, I'm going to need to cut this off at a slant. So I'm just gonna mark on my board where I cut out here, and then I'll just basically just cut off this edge on both sides. All right, guys, so I got all of the pieces for the tops cut out, and now what I want to do is I want to install some Formica laminate on top of them. I've installed, even though I've got it covered up right now, I installed some laminate onto this worktop here, and I just found it to be so nice when it comes to working because glue doesn't stick to it, it's super easy to clean up, it's pretty durable. So I decided to go ahead and invest in installing Formica on all of these tops. That way, hopefully this will just hold up really well over time. So the Formica that I got, it's not, oh gosh, it's heavy. Hold on one second, let me cut this down. All right, now I actually picked this stuff up from Home Depot. Now I've never seen it in the store itself, but if you go on to homedepot.com, they have all different types of, in different designs of Formica laminate. The one I did on this top, I just chose to do black. But the one thing I will say about the black is that even though it looks pretty simple and cool, it shows dust like crazy. So I thought for this miter saw station, since there's gonna be a lot of dust, I would go with something that maybe wouldn't show it as bad. Now I know I did paint the entire base cabinet black, so that's gonna show dust, but that was paint I had left over and I wasn't wanting to spend any more money on paint. So that's why I did the black, but I think the contrast between the black base and this will look really cool. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can cut this. My next step is to go ahead and get this thing cut to size for all of the different tops that I need. I've seen some people cut this on the table saw or with a circular saw, but I don't really trust my blade to not chip this out. And what I've done in the past is I've just used one of these little laminate scores. I'll basically just mark and measure where I want to score my piece, and then once you score it enough times, it'll break right on that line. I'll show you guys how to do that. I'll show you a few of the steps for installing this laminate, but I will tell you that I already have a video out on my channel where I really go into all the details of how to install laminate. So if you're curious about all the steps and the whole process, then I'll leave that video link so you can go and check that out. All right, let's get this stuff installed. Now, a couple of things to note when doing this, and these are just things that I learned from doing this last time. I like to wear gloves. These are just some cut resistant gloves, but probably any gloves would help out because when you cut this laminate edge and you break it along that line, it is very sharp. Last time I did this, I sliced my finger so badly, which I would have never guessed that this would have been that sharp when I snapped this line, but it totally was. So wear gloves if you can, wear safety glasses, and then lastly, wear some sort of ear protection because this is very similar to the whole nails on the chalkboard sound, which I absolutely cannot stand, so I'll be wearing these headphones as well. All right, let's get this thing cut now. Okay, well, that went much better the last time I did that. As you can see, for whatever reason, this one cracked right down in the middle. Luckily, I oversized my cut, so I'll still have plenty for what I need for this top, but that does suck. I'm gonna have to see if I can get enough of this because I was planning on using that for some of the other pieces, but hopefully we'll have enough. This is why it's probably a good idea to order more laminate than you need.
Now it's time to get that laminate attached to my plywood pieces, and to do this I'm going to use a little something called contact cement. The way this stuff works is you apply it to both pieces, you let them fully dry, and then once they're dry and they make contact with each other, they're stuck. So I basically started by applying the contact cement to all of my little edge pieces first, and then the edges of all the plywood pieces. Now I did cut these edge pieces on my table saw because I didn't have that much scoring work in me. Once I had all of my laminate edges attached to my plywood pieces, then I just came in with my router and a flush trim bit and got everything flush on both the top and the bottom. Then I just repeated that same process for the pieces that were getting attached on top. I applied the contact cement to both surfaces, brushed out any of the air bubbles, and let it fully dry, which took about 30 to 45 minutes. Now it's time to get these laminate pieces attached. First, I grabbed a couple of scrap boards and vacuumed them off good to make sure no debris ends up underneath my laminate top. Once they're good and clean, I placed a couple on top of my plywood pieces, and then I carefully placed my sheet of laminate on top of my scrap boards. Then I just line up the laminate so that I have it covering my entire piece. Then I can go ahead and start removing some of those scrap boards while I firmly place the laminate onto my plywood top. This contact will cause the two pieces to stick together. I just work my way out until I have all of my scrap boards removed and my laminate attached. Now once it's attached, I then take a roller and spend a lot of time rolling over the laminate to make sure that I get good adhesion.
All right, I got the pieces for my top laminated now. I did let this sort of set up overnight. Now this contact cement does say that it bonds instantly, but since I plan on routing this, I wanted to give it a little extra time to make sure it was good and solid. So now I just need to basically trim this to size using a flush trim bit. I'm gonna take these pieces outside and get them all trimmed to their exact size.
Now this is the first time that I've ever used laminate for my edges as well. The last time I did this, I used some hardwood trim for my edges, and that turned out so much better, I gotta say. I did end up getting quite a bit of chipping on the edges while I was trimming this up. Now I'd heard that running the router in the opposite direction might help with the chipping, but I actually ended up getting way more chipping that way, so I'm not sure. I could be the problem here, which is honestly very likely. If I could do it over, I would probably just add some hardwood trim instead of using those laminate edges, but I think I can hide those little chips, so you'll never know. Well, you guys will, but I can trust you with this secret, right? My edges were nice and flush now, but they were also nice and sharp. So I took a file and worked on filing down the edges some to smooth them out. I can now get my top pieces attached to the base of the miter saw station. To do this, I just set them in place, got them lined up so that I had an even overhang on each side and clamped in place. Once they were clamped, I attached the tops from the underside with screws. Now, I was very careful here where I placed my screws because my plan is to route out a groove in this top for some T-track, and I'd really like to avoid hitting a screw if possible. Once all of my top pieces were attached, I just made sure everything was good and level before moving on to the next step. I don't know what it is, but something about seeing that level bubble right in the middle, it just gets me amped up. I guess it lets me know that I've done something right. Next, I wanted to get my miter saw shimmed up to its proper height so that it would sit flush with the top. To do this, I just used a couple of handy shims to get my height right and then attached the miter saw to the base with some screws and washers.
All right guys, so it's time for the step that I've literally been dreading since the beginning of this build, and that's routing out a groove in this top here for this T-track so that way I can have a stop block system set up. Now, it's a little bit nerve-wracking trying to route a groove in this laminate top because I don't know if I'm gonna get any chip out like I did on some of the edges. I'm hoping that I won't to kind of counteract that. I did install a brand new straight bit in here, so hopefully a really sharp new bit will just cut right through this stuff and I won't have any chip out. But it's still pretty nerve-wracking just because I spent a lot of time. I think the top looks really nice right now. I did go ahead and take a picture of it so that if I totally screw this up, I know that, hey, it looked nice at one time. But anyways, let's just send it. I'm gonna go ahead and route a groove on this piece and then on the piece over there as well, and we'll just hope for the best.
I did call an audible last minute and decided to add a little painter's tape to that section that was going to be routed out. My thinking is that this might help prevent that laminate from chipping as easily. Now, I didn't try to do this all in one pass, so after I made one pass with my router, I lowered my bed and made another pass until I got to the depth I needed for my T-track. I'm proud to report that my T-track fits nicely in my groove and I got 0 chip out on that laminate, so we're gonna call that a success. Now, as if routing one groove in my brand new top wasn't scary enough, I decided to add another one. This groove will be much shallower though, and its purpose is to house a tape measurer for my stop block system. Once both of my grooves were routed out, I went ahead and started adding my T-track. I just hammered these into my groove and then attached them with some screws. Now, I did have to cut one of the T-tracks to size, and I just did this very carefully with my miter saw. Since these are aluminum, most miter saws will cut aluminum, but you just have to take it slow. Now it's time to get that adhesive tape measure installed into my grooves. Now the most important thing for this tape measure is that I want it to be accurate. To help me achieve this, I just took a little scrap wood and placed some double-sided tape on it and then stuck it to the base of my miter saw. With my scrap block firmly attached, I then make a cut with my miter saw. This will show me exactly where the blade will be. I should also mention that I made sure my blade was square before this step. Then I placed the adhesive backing tape into my groove and pulled back the paper to expose the adhesive. I will say that this adhesive is extremely sticky, so I feel pretty confident that I'm not going to have any issues with this stuff staying attached. Now, using my scrap block as a reference, I can line up the 0 mark on the tape measure with the very edge of where the blade landed and then stick the tape measure down in my groove. And the really cool thing about this fast cap tape measure is that it's reversible. So all I have to do for applying it to the other side is simply flip it over and start from 0 again from that side. I also added in these little PowerTech stop blocks that fit inside the T-track for making repeatable cuts. Now let's do a little test cut and see if this stop block system is accurate.
Now, one of the main reasons that I held out for so long on making a permanent miter saw station inside the workshop was because of my lack of dust collection. So I knew when I decided to build this miter saw station indoors, I was gonna have to figure out some sort of way to help cut down on the dust that's created when cutting. And miter saws are notorious for creating a lot of dust when cutting. So I've got my work cut out for me, but I think I have a couple of options that are really gonna help me keep the dust under control. Let's get started. Okay, so obviously I'm gonna hook this miter saw up to a vacuum since it's indoors now, and having it hooked up to the vacuum will definitely help out some, but there's definitely some room for improvement. Now, one of the kind of goofy things about this saw, in addition to its pretty large footprint, is this dust collection port here. It's pretty long and pretty far away from where most of the dust is being generated at the blade. And I've never really been able to find a vacuum hose that really fits it very well. I've been able to make some adapters work, but I always end up having to use like tape or something like that. So It does work some, but really, like I said, there's lots of room for improvement. So I knew when I brought this thing indoors, I wanted to sort of make an upgrade that would really hopefully help achieve much better dust collection. And so what I did is I bought one of these little kits from Travis over at Shop Nation. Now he 3D prints these parts that you can add on to your specific miter saw, and they are supposed to like really just help with the dust collection, collecting way more of that dust at the source, sort of replacing this really long dust port here. So I ordered one of these things, and now let's get it installed on the saw and see how it works.
To get started, I first had to pull this really inefficient stock dust port off of the miter saw. To do this, I just removed one screw and pulled it out from the back. Next, I had to remove the rear blade guard by removing 2 screws. Now, I do want to hold on to these screws because I'll be replacing them in just a bit. Next, I added this provided vacuum attachment to the dust chute body. Then I attached this rubber flexible flap to the chute body using the provided screws. Next, I removed the screw for the blade guard arm and sort of just set this out of the way for now. I then got the new dust chute body in place and worked on getting it attached to my miter saw using those 2 blade guard screws that I removed earlier. I made sure this was on snug, but you don't want to over tighten, which can risk breaking the plastic. Once it was fully installed, I could go ahead and reattach that blade guard arm. Lastly, I installed a provided vacuum adapter piece to my hose, and it was now ready to accept a vacuum hose. I have to admit, I did a really terrible job of capturing the difference here, but in the first video, I'm making a cut without the vacuum turned on, and it makes a big mess, as you can see. With the second cut, I turned the vacuum on, and I felt like it did a much better job of sort of funneling most of that dust into the vacuum itself. Now, it's not 100% perfect. There's still going to be some dust generated when cutting, but this seems to do a much better job collecting dust than that stock dust port that was on my miter saw.
All right, guys, we've got that piece installed on the miter saw now. It's ready for a vacuum hose to basically just be connected to it, which means that we need to get a vacuum set up for this system. Now, the vacuum that I'm gonna be using to basically live in this miter saw station is this 4.5 horsepower, 12-gallon shop vac right here. Now, this is actually a vacuum that my dad gave to me several years ago. It's kind of just been sitting around the shop because I haven't really been using it. I have another Ridgit vacuum that's a little bit more powerful, and that seems to be the one that I use most of the time. So this is actually perfect because now I finally have something that I can use this shop vac for. I think this one will be powerful enough. We'll see. I'm gonna test it out over the next couple months, and hopefully it'll have plenty power to be able to collect all the dust from this miter saw. Now, I could just hook this shop vac up to the miter saw and call it good, but as the whole theme of this part of the video is improving my overall dust collection as best as I can, I'm gonna go a few steps further for this shop vac. One of the first things that I'm going to do to sort of upgrade this shop vac is I'm gonna install this HEPA filter. Basically just replace the filter that was in there, which was very full and very clogged, which basically made this thing underperform. Installing this HEPA filter will just make sure that it's really filtering out all of the very fine debris. I think this says that it will filter down to 0.3 microns, and it's 99.97% efficient. So those are pretty good numbers for me. So an easy upgrade that you can make to your shop vac is replacing the filter with one of these HEPA cartridge filters. The second sort of upgrade I'm going to make is installing this Dust Stopper Pro system to the shop vac itself and connecting that all together. Now, for those that don't know, this is sort of just a dust cyclone separator. It basically will just cyclone the dust and really filter out the really heavy heavy debris, from the finer stuff. It just helps improve the overall lifespan of your filters, so that way you don't have to replace them as often. And then a lot of your dust will actually end up in this 5-gallon bucket here rather than in your shop vac, which, like I said, will just end up clogging up your filters over time. So the reason I went with this one in particular, I got this one off of Home Depot's website. And the reason I went with this, I've seen a couple of these dust cyclone separators, but I went with this one because I can just put it on this 5-gallon bucket here, and it's pretty low clearance. Since I'm trying to fit all of this inside of my miter saw station here, I've seen some of the ones like the Oneida one, which is a lot taller. This one's a little lower profile, so I think this will work well. I can basically just hide all of this stuff in my miter saw station under these 2 sections here, and basically conceal all the hoses and everything. So that's sort of the reason I went with this one in particular. So now I just need to get this out of the box, get everything connected to my shop vac, get that new HEPA filter installed, and then get this thing hooked up to the miter saw station. And then I have one more thing that I'll show you that I think is going to be a massive upgrade and is really going to help improve the dust collection overall. I'll show you that in just a bit.
Now, when I was getting this Dust Stopper Pro set up, I did notice that the instructions for this thing recommended using 5 horsepower vacuums and above in combination with this. Now, my vacuum is only 4.5 horsepower, so I'm curious to see if it will be powerful enough. I'm hopeful that it's close enough, but I'll test this thing out over the next few months and see if I notice a reduction in suction power. Next, I took a hole saw and drilled a couple of holes in this wooden top so that I could pass my vacuum hose and power cord through. I also installed a couple of grommets to those holes as well for a bit of a cleaner look.
All right guys, things are moving along pretty well. I've got this piece attached to my vacuum to help improve that dust collection. I've got my vacuum hose plugged into that, and then I just ran my vacuum hose through this wood piece here, through these little grommets that I installed. I've got my vacuum hose and my power cord running through this piece into this cavity under here. Now it's time to get that vacuum and Dust Stopper Pro to live in here permanently, but we have one pretty big problem that we need to solve before we can do that. See, the thing is I built this miter saw station in this section here and there's no power. So that's a pretty big problem that we're going to have to solve. And actually a lot of the walls that I have in this garage space that are unfinished have no outlets on them either. So even if I would have had this thing up against a wall, I still would have had to add some sort of outlets for power for this thing. So eventually I want to come in and add outlets to those walls, but that's a project for another day. How I'm gonna solve the power issue for this miter saw station for now is there is an outlet behind me here, and the plan is that I'm just going to run an extension cord into that outlet and then have it run behind the tool chest on the floor, and then I'll just drill a hole where it can come into this cavity here, so that I can plug the vacuum up to it as well as the saw. And one of those things that I mentioned, the final thing that is really gonna help with the dust collection for this miter saw station is by plugging it all into this thing here. Now this is called the Ortis vacuum switch. And basically what this thing does is it allows you to plug your miter saw into it, or table saw, sander, router, whatever. And then you can plug your vacuum into it as well, and you can set it on auto, so that way every time you power on one of those tools, so in this case every time I go to use the miter saw which is plugged in, it'll automatically turn on the vacuum and run the vacuum, and then I think it will even run for like a couple seconds after you're done cutting, just to go ahead and clean out that lines. Now this is going to be extremely helpful because I can't tell you the amount of times that I go to make a cut and forget to turn the vacuum on, and then there's just dust everywhere. So that's a pretty big thing that I tend to forget. So this is going to help a lot because it's gonna make sure that every time I'm cutting, that vacuum is also running to collect that extra dust. And now I didn't really mention it, But the last sort of dust collection thing that I have for this workshop is I do have this Win air filter above me, and I tend to run that thing quite a bit while I'm down here working. Now, especially since I plan to do some cutting indoors, pretty much every time that I'm cutting on the miter saw, I'll turn this air filter on, and that way most of that fine dust that's in the air can be caught by this air filter. Now, I didn't exactly plan this out, but it actually ends up working perfectly, that this thing sits literally right above where the cutting is happening. So my hope is that if any extra dust gets into the air, this thing will catch all that fine dust so that I'm not breathing that in. So that'll be hopefully really helpful thing to have. Now, I will probably also eventually build some sort of dust hood to cover up this section here. For now, I'm just gonna leave it as is, and honestly, the reason for that is because I have run out of plywood, and I don't wanna go buy more plywood just to build this little dust shroud for this miter saw. So whenever I get some more scrap plywood, I will probably build something just to basically box this thing off, and again, catch and contain like any of that excess dust and just kind of keep it from getting into the air. So those are pretty much all the plans that I have for dust collection for this miter saw station. There's always probably going to be room for improvement, but that's sort of something that I can tackle as I go, as I use this thing and I figure out areas that I can improve upon. All right, let's go ahead and work on getting that power attached to this section under here, and then we can officially call this thing done.
I started by running this extension cord behind my husband's tool chest that I'm pretty sure he hasn't cleaned off in over a century. So this was a bit of a challenge. What made it even more challenging is that I ended up buying an extension cord that was like 5 times longer than I actually needed. Not sure why I did that. Anyways, once the cord was run behind the tool chest, I just used a cord cover to run it on the floor and applied a lot of duct tape to hold it down. It's not exactly the prettiest solution, but I think it will get the job done. Next, I just drilled a hole in the side of my cabinet where the vacuum will live so that I can run the world's longest extension cord through. Lastly, I got that Ortis vacuum switch mounted, plugged in both my miter saw and vacuum, and then switched it to auto. Now when I turn my saw on, the vacuum will automatically turn on and then run for an additional 10 seconds to clean the line. All that was left now was to get that vacuum system in place inside of the cabinet. And with that, I can now proudly announce that this miter saw station is complete.
All right guys, that is a wrap on this miter saw station. Now I've literally been dreaming of building this thing for a very long time. basically every single day that I would have to haul this thing in and outside a bunch of times and really kind of kill my back at the end of the day, I would think to myself how nice it would be to be able to set this thing up inside and not have to take it in and out all day. And I'm happy to report that I don't have to do that anymore. And I am so happy about that. Not only that, I am really happy with the way that this thing turned out. Now I know this setup would not work for everybody since it is a little bit bigger than some miter saw stations that you see. And I did that, like I mentioned earlier in the video, to basically accommodate this saw in particular, rather than having to go out and upgrade. Now I'm able to basically put this in the center of the room because I have the space, and so I just went with it. I just built a massive set of cabinets with storage on both sides. I actually have so much storage now that I don't even have enough stuff to put in all of the drawers. So I filled up a couple of them and then I left a couple of them empty. If I know anything about myself, I'll probably be purchasing more tools and things for this workshop in the future. So now I've got a place to put them. Not only that, I've got a couple of work areas now since I went with this fenceless stop block system. All I have to do is just slide these stop blocks out, and now I have a pretty large, nice area that I can work on. If I need somewhere that I can set up stuff to, you know, have somewhere to paint or just all different uses. I mean, you can never have enough work surfaces in a workshop. I also now have a new home for one of my newest tools, which is this Craig Foreman pocket hole cutting machine. I like having a place where it's just going to be stationary and it's not something that I've got to tuck away and then pull out when I need it. Now it has a home where I can do pocket hole cutting, which is something that I do quite a bit. So having these work surfaces are going to be really handy. And in addition to all of that, I just think it looks cool. It's going to be a really big focal point for my workshop. It's something that I kind of just made it my own. I added my logo and some other designs through using vinyl, and I just made it something that makes me happy. So that way when I come in here every single day and I look at it, it's something I'm proud of and it's something that I think looks really nice. So I think even though this is just a workshop piece, hey, make it nice. Make it something that makes you happy. So anyways, I think I was definitely able to do that. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed following me along on this build. I had a lot of fun making this. I hope you had a lot of fun watching it. If you want to see what I build next using this miter saw station, then you better go ahead and get subscribed. I got a lot of things in the works now that I've finally done with this. A lot of builds coming up, so go ahead and get subscribed so you don't miss it. I've got all of the tools linked that I used in this video. If you want to check any of those out, I'll leave all of those linked in the description box below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you for my next build. Bye.